Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Hey, welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wannup. How you doing? How are you? I feel like I'm getting more listeners because nobody's working. I feel like, and you know what? That's okay for me. But I'd rather you be listening on your way to work. So I gotta say I'm tremendously lucky that I am starting up a show, and I am recording this Monday night, and the fate of the writer's strike is just hours away, and I don't know. They haven't told us what the outcome will be, and I think they're hoping to keep people working, and I think we are too. We have some scripts, and hopefully they don't shut it down, because I'd like to work. You know, I like it, because then I get to tell you about it. So, you know. But it reminds me every time I start a show, advice I should give to people who are in this industry or starting out. If you, I don't care how many art classes you take, or drafting or drawing or CAD or you know, textiles, you should take a negotiation class, because you will have to negotiate every single deal you make on every single show. You could take what they offer. You could say yes the first time out. That's you. You do you. You're not doing anybody else favors, and you're not doing yourself any favors, because it's all about self-worth, and you have to believe that your position and you are coming in and giving it your all 1,000%, and you are worth more. Just always think of that. The other thing I would say, take a body language class. Know people's body language when you're talking to them in negotiations. That's also a good one. I also highly recommend Laws of Power. I love that book. I have it right next to me, actually. Laws of Power really can get into somebody's head a little bit psychologically, and just know the type of personalities you're dealing with in this industry. I always think that's helpful. So the writer's strike. You know what? Go for it. Do it. Just do it. Just strike and get it, because at some point I hope that it will trickle down to us, because these new contracts or new media, which was deals were made, you know, contracts were made over 10 years ago or something. It's insane and stupid, and you work for streaming companies and you make less, and it makes no sense, because I'm doing the same job I did on that show, but you're paying me less. It makes no sense. Or you're paying me more. That makes no sense either. But the writer's strike issued the compensation for writers in the media. Deadline has had a really good couple articles the last couple of days about like breaking everything down, and just giving specifically, I wanted to read this one paragraph specifically. With the current strike, the WGA seeks gains in compensation and residuals and curbs on mini rooms where groups of writers work in advance of the production of the TV series to break stories and write scripts. The Guild has argued that the producers are well able to compensate writers more fairly. The Guild also wants to establish some sort of policy on AI and authorship, especially if a writer's ideas are used on the basis of AI-generated work. Now, you might think, oh, don't let that one go right now. Don't think about that, but don't let that one go, because that is going to affect us. I've already seen how you can put something into AI and create a whole scene, a whole set, a whole lit set. I mean, you can do things now with AI that, you know, as tools can help us, but can also work against us. And we don't want that either. The good thing is probably anybody that could use it against us, they don't know how to use the tools anyway. So that kind of helps us. But yeah, that's what I would say. So on the eve of this writer's strike, I'm for it. I think it needs to be done. I hate that people will be out of work. I hate to see those picket lines, and I don't know. I just think it's inevitable. Whenever they have wanted anything, or any of us, we've had to strike. I mean, they didn't just give us health care. We had to strike for it. They wanted to take hours away from our health care. We have to fight for it. It's decent wages and decent living for, just to work on a TV show. It's crazy. It's crazy, and I love it. It's really crazy. Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit. I'm going to an FYC event this weekend. It's hosted by Apple, and it's costumes and production design, which I think is really smart. Apple is just stepping up their creativity. They want the awards. They want, the creative awards. And I think it's really smart to do this and have this panel. They're having the production designer, Jamie McCall, who you can listen to on this podcast, and the costume designer, Agnes Strathy from Schmegadoon, Season 2, the production designer, Paul Cribbs, and costume designer, Jack Levy from Ted Lasso, Lute, Jennifer Degnan, who you can see here on this podcast, and costume designer Kristen Mann, who I've worked with many times, who is a doll for the show Lute, physical production designer LJ Hoodishell, Hello Tomorrow, Maya Siegel, production designer. You can also hear her on this, and it's moderated by the ADG, president, Nelson Coates, who does the morning show. So that's this Saturday. I'm going to hit that up. I can't wait. I can't wait to see Jamie and others and meet Maya, which would be great. She doesn't even know yet that I'm coming to get you. So I'll let you know how that goes. It should be awesome. It's just a panel of them talking about their work, and I just think I really applaud Apple for supporting the creatives in this sense and giving them an FYC. So bravo to Apple. What am I watching? Well, I'm watching Succession. We talk about it every week. It's awesome. Barry, totally in. This week's episode, awesome sauce. I started Shrinking on Apple. Harrison Ford, production designer Cabot McMullen, and production and set decorator Andrea May Fenton. Really nice offices, evenly toned, very I don't know if they're in Oregon. Whatever, it makes me feel like they're in Oregon. I don't even know where they are. I forget. But it's funny. I only did the one episode, but I'm gonna keep on with that. I love the show Somebody Somewhere on HBO that comes on after Barry with Bridget Everett, the comedian. It's a really odd cast. It's not like a in-depth show. It's a comedy, dark comedy. Her real life. I just feel like these two people are like having conversations like it's kind of unscripted and real. I don't know. I just think it's funny. Like it'll be done. It'll be like completely boring, and then like a scene happens and you're like, well, this is really like my life. This touches me. This is good. So I would recommend it as a dark comedy. Speaking of dark, I finished David Milch's book, My Life's Work, a memoir, and I think I finished it. I had this week in the car in Audible. The guy who's reading it sounds exactly like David Milch, I believe, with this accent and like this passion, and it's unreal. I wish that I could speak like him and write like him. Just his descriptions of dialogue from NYPD Blue and going through these scenes and how he wrote them. And I mean, I was sobbing, and I kind of remembered the episodes that he's talking about. It was unbelievable. He gives a shout out to my cousin Kim, who played Detective Russell. He also describes like how he came up with Deadwood, which was a completely different story set in a completely different era about somebody completely else. And HBO already had Rome coming out. It was, and so they said, can you put it somewhere else? And he came back a couple months later and came up with Deadwood. Like, amazing. I loved Deadwood. And he tells about how it got canceled and how they brought it back. And he also, oddly enough, talks about the writer's strike in 2007 and puts it very, very poignantly that, look, the producers talk to us like we're children. You can't have this, you can have this now, you can do this. And the way that he describes it really makes you understand what people are feeling. And it was just odd to me that he's talking about something that is relevant all of these years later still. He also talks about projects that never happened and like this Johnny Carson show that he wanted to do, which probably would have been brilliant. But he is writing this as he's suffering from Alzheimer's, and it seems that his wife Rita was really his rock and highly commendable in their relationship and very forgiving, because he goes through millions of dollars in either his gambling or drug habits. So it's a really good book. I can't recommend it. Thank you, David Smith, for telling me about it on this podcast earlier this year. And I would totally recommend it to all, especially writers. Just his process and how he got into writing. It's really good. And I cried. It was good. So, yeah, let's see. In this episode, I speak with production designer Kathrin Eder. Originally from Austria, Kathrin started out as an assistant and stumbled into working on a commercial and just fell in love with the art department. She hustled her way up in positions and even in the set deck department, and is now production designing film and TV series. Kathrin's work on the reboot of Clive Barker's 1987 horror classic Hellraiser in 2022, she helped to create a world that was both terrifying and captivating. I had to watch it, and I've never been a fan of Hellraiser, and it was scary. But her designs of this film's iconic puzzle box, the laminate configuration, I hope I'm saying that right, helped to establish a visual language that has become synonymous with Hellraiser franchise. So, and we talk a little bit about it not being like it's not a reboot, a retelling, and the fans and the cult fans that Hellraiser has is really incredible. She uses lighting and texture to help create a sense of unease throughout the film, and her attention to detail in this Art Deco design that she did was, I really enjoyed it. So in addition to her work on Hellraiser, Kathrin is also worked on the Starz show BMF, which is Black Mafia Family, and designing Detroit in the 80s for a story of brothers who created their own mafia family. You can see her work on kathrineder.com, and I hope you enjoy.
So much with our craft, and I think the Set Deck Creators Society, as well as what Involt is doing with the PDC, allows us that safe space.
Yes.
And it's a really good thing. So,
Yeah.
and I imagine your podcast too. So
I try.
yes.
I love it. I wish Wayfair or somebody would pay me to do it, but you know.
You will. I mean, after 100 episodes, I imagine there will be some traction and interest. So.
Yeah, it's going well. That's a dream, but it's more, it's really education too of what we do and explaining what we do to people who want to get into the business. So I try to take that approach too. So if some of my questions do seem like really dumb, I try to dumb it down a little bit, just because it's not just us listening to it. I try to cater to an audience who doesn't know our lingo in a sense, but
of course.
Yeah. Where are you from?
I totally understand that. I'm from Austria originally.
I love your accent.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I just had 20 years on the 23rd of January. I had 20 years in moving to Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't believe it's been 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
but I kept my accent. I was never in front of the camera, so I might as well put my accent to work.
No, I know. It's a beautiful thing of I'm assuming you know languages. I don't know any other language. I just have like a Philly accent that comes out when I drink now. So it's like it's not as cool. Like,
Yeah.
not as
Well, I mean,
charming.
yeah. When people in the United States say that they don't have access to languages as much, I mean, there, Europe with I don't know how many languages, 25 languages and more, is crammed into an area that's
Yeah.
3/4 of the size of the United States. So
Yeah.
we cross a border and we're forced to
Yes.
deal with different languages.
Yeah.
And here you just don't have it as much. So it's a different cultural history.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
in that regard, I never blame anyone for not being trilingual or bilingual, or, a lot of people are just by their background.
What did you come to the US to work in film and TV?
Yeah, I came, the Austrian film community and artist community, I would say, is very aristocratic in a way. It's very small. And I think there's this preconceived notion that you already have to know what you're doing as a very young adult.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you have to have those connections to get in. And so I just didn't fit into, it's a very thought heavy process over there. And when I visited the United States in Los Angeles the first time, I realized that artists in the States can just explore curiosity, and artists were much more open in Los Angeles. I talked to fine artists and filmmakers and everyone when I came to share ideas. There's not this need to be very protective about your ideas. There's just this open sharing, and I also think that what I really appreciate to this day, that people out of the film industry and in Los Angeles, you can speak from your gut rather than having to intellectualize everything.
Yeah.
And so I really, that brought me, like, after visiting the United States several times, and then coming for a personal just residency to a friend's house in LA, I realized that that's much better suited for me as a person than the Austrian aristocratic art scene. I just didn't dig it. Yeah.
It's good that you figured that out, though. It's also you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't click. So it's awesome you figured that out.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was 20 years, 2 weeks ago.
It seems like I always have people's websites, which yours is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
And then I have like an IMDb, or I do like some background research, and I feel like it looks like you just dived right into being a production designer or like assistant set decorator. Like, how did you just dive into this? Did you have connections? Did you get lucky? I mean, I never say lucky because we all have to be at the right place at the right time and know what we're doing. So
yeah, I think my path was kind of organic because I didn't come to the United States to be a production designer. I actually didn't know anything about the art department. I just realized when I visited Los Angeles for the first time that film is something that's approachable for a normal mortal human being. And when I came, I signed up to LA City College, which was they had a good international student program that I could afford coming from a very humble background. And I wanted to be a screenwriter and a director, but I didn't even question that a lot in my early 20s. I never had that path.
Right.
And an ex-boyfriend of mine was also a screenwriter who had some noticeable success at a very early age at Sundance. And he at some point said, Kat, yeah, you can be a screenwriter, but wealthy people can be screenwriters because they can just write until something hits. And you might want to keep your bank account happy. So find yourself a job in the film industry. And I couldn't find a job without a work visa. So I became an artist assistant. And at some point, those two fine artists said, Kat, you love film and you love art. Why don't you go into production design at the art department? And one of their other friends was a production designer who brought me on as an intern on a Comcast commercial. And I just fell in love with the art department.
Mm.
And I recall we shot up in Santa Clarita and I was all in it. Back then the union regulations were a little different. And I was able to carry furniture and carry in flats and paint and do all these things. And it came to a point that the directors noticed and they said, who is that young woman over there? And they realized that I wasn't getting paid. So the production company made up a fake green screen rental for $600 and paid me.
Oh my gosh, that's so kind. That was awesome. So nice. You must have been hustling.
Yes. And I don't know if that still happens, but that was the moment where I say, having read about mythology and I dove into storytelling, and I realized that if you look at my path as in terms of mythology, that was the moment that production design and the art department chose me. I didn't choose it, it chose me, and I just fell in love. And then I became a PA and a set dresser, and then I was an on-set dresser for a long time once I got my work permit figured out. And from an on-set dresser, I became a buyer, and I helped an art department coordinator for a minute, but the coordinating part didn't work out so well. And then all along, while I was trying to make money and really learn from people that already were much more advanced in the industry, I teamed up with master class students at UCLA and USC and AFI and production designed their short films.
Smart.
And that's why I could make mistakes. And I said, as long as you pay for my gas and put food on my table, I can do it. So it was kind of that parallel line that I worked my way up through the ranks on bigger jobs. And all the while I pursued the opportunity or the chance. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And at some point I got my first feature film with $2,000 budget. And I hired my best friend, and her and I did everything from special effects to being background extra zombies.
Was she still your best friend after you paid her $1?
Well, she's a very successful set now, Melissa Jusufi.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's funny.
Yeah, we started together, and I'm so proud of her, the path that she made in the last 15 years. Yeah.
Oh, she's awesome. Oh, yeah. That's so funny. I know when I think of people who I did like Hallmark films out with, and then I run into them on a project. I'm like, look at us. Look at us. Yeah. Look at us getting out of there and getting other things. How good is that? It's always we grew up.
Yeah, we definitely grow up. And you grow up quick if you are ambitious. And I had to learn a lot. You have to learn how to say, I don't know. And you have to learn how to own your mistakes. And you have to humble yourself and become a very good communicator and, learn project management and learn how to deal with big egos and,
so many different personalities and from show to show and TV to film and, going to different cities if you're shooting. It's an amazing array of people that we have to deal with and personalities and still be a manager, a budgeter, and still, get it all done. It's a lot, but it's
a lot.
It's crazy what we do. I watched Hellraiser. I just watched that. I never watched the original because it scared the shit out of me when I was little. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to watch this. And I was like, it was so scary because I kept thinking about how it impacted me that I was so scared of it when I was little I wouldn't even watch it. Then watching it this time and being like, with a designer eye, because I'm talking to you and I'm looking at this house and the set and everything, and I'm like, man, there's a lot that goes into these movies. There is a lot going into this movie right now, and I wonder if a lot of it went into the original, or was there any conversation with you of we want to pay homage to this, or was it clean slate, this is new, let's design it?
Well, I think there's many different aspects that kind of came together in order to define the film of what the final outcome is at this point. The original film in '86 was a pure indie film. I think they had a couple of $100,000. And I myself am not a fan of horror films. And I think that the directors that hire me, and especially David Bruckner, having done The Night House with him and Hellraiser afterwards, appreciated the fact that I am not a horror film fan. I come from a background of realism and human patterns, and I enjoy building those worlds and understanding who our characters are. And in horror film, that's not much different than in a drama or a comedy. We ask the same questions. We need to get to the bottom of understanding our characters and their actions in order to understand which world they're moving in and how they're interacting with that world. And so we approached Hellraiser, or the script that I ended up working on, and this Hellraiser, in the same way, with the same kind and with the same approach. But there was this pressure to step into the shoes of the original, because David really wanted it to be a reboot and not another sequel. And I can tell you, I have not watched any of the sequels. I've watched the first one, I've read that book, and that's what we worked off of. And in that process, I got to know Clive Barker, and I listened to interviews of him and understood what a deep intellectual thinker he is, and how much thought he brought to a movie that if you're not a particular fan of that very specific genre, you could judge that very easily as something that's not interesting or that's obsolete, and that didn't have any impact on society, but it really did.
Yeah.
In many ways, with BDSM, homosexuality, there's so many building stones that he created back in the 80s that for that time were visionary and very important for social growth. And so we kind of docked onto that approach 30 years later, when everything that Clive Barker talked about back then has become something that we are all very used to. I don't want to call it norm, because it's not norm, but it's not shocking anymore. And so we tapped into different themes that were probably broader as our society grew, and our social networking and the way and globalization, everything kind of blew themes from this small film that we had in the 80s into a much bigger context of what is addiction, what is pain, what is seduction, what is the history of all of that, what is the history of torture and sensation, and how do we deal with it now? And the Void character, I think, is a perfect representation in a very exaggerated way of the egomaniacs that we meet nowadays in American society and throughout the world. So that was really wonderful feeding ground to build a complex backstory for that character, which was a lot of fun. And what Hellraiser allows me to do is same with other I've only done The Night House and Hellraiser in terms of horror, is that you get to deal with themes and subjects that are deeply personal on many levels, because we're still we're dealing with universal themes of emotion, and
you're invoking that emotion, like that's a very high intense emotion when in a theater or in a movie, when you're trying to invoke fear and panic and everything. It's not easy. It's not easy to do. And it's not just the camera doing it or the acting. It's everything around it. It's the music, it's the sets, it's everything. And
I think exactly with that in mind, we went ahead and tried to really visualize and mirror who Void as a person is for that mansion, and how we can represent a specific, and trigger a specific emotional arc by playing with a certain color palette and textures, and working very much on the vertical axis as well, because the Cenobites descend into this world. And that was all amazing playground. I'd never had an opportunity to do anything like it. We had concept designers, and I had many set designers, which I'd never had more than 2 before, and suddenly I have 7 and 2 extra to design furniture and light fixtures. And all of that happened in a foreign country with language barriers and delays. And and
Were you
missing
in
resources.
Bulgaria? Where were you? Oh,
In Serbia. We
Serbia.
shot in
Serbia.
Belgrade, Serbia,
Yeah.
yeah. But COVID and brought film production to a halt, and then it suddenly bottlenecked.
Mm.
And there were a lot of film productions there at the same time, and Knives Out being the big contender with our tiny little production, and they had a lot of the resources, and we got the scraps that we tried to put to use, and those sometimes disappeared
Yeah.
to go over and work on
Right.
the big movie. So it was definitely a test on many levels, and I'm amazed we got it to where we got it. Let's say it that way.
I
Yeah.
also appreciate the lighting in that movie. I feel like with the, because I'm gonna say it was like almost like an Art Deco like theme in that big room, which I'm assuming was a build. That big room,
Yes,
yeah.
we built a lot. Like that was, yeah, the entire mansion was kind of empty locations that we structured and built out with full dresses. And then that main room was our hero stage build. And Eli, well, it was like a whole team. It was VFX, DP, director. We all collaborated with lighting tests and color palette and camera tests to really formulate something that's almost that lacked life. That it's that void is a representation of chronic illness, and we really wanted to bring that into space. But at the same time, Art Deco felt very appropriate to use as a pillar to design this world within, because it felt so well fitted to the Cenobite world.
Right.
Art Deco kind of just married, and so we took those elements and tried to go with it and run with it.
I loved all the intricateness of it was the ceiling, and then there was like a reflection of that, like in the floor design that you have, and in the gates and everything. Like this repetition that you kept throughout the design, I thought was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it's going to get too redundant. But then you put yourself into the place of a billionaire and how they would augment their mansion or build their mansion. There's probably a consistent look throughout.
Yeah. No, it was really nice. It let me forget what I was watching a little bit, you know, like I'm gonna focus on this gate right now instead of these arms coming out, and then there's that scene with that big gate that like almost crushes them.
Yes.
That one, yeah, and how you have, I'm assuming it was a build, you have that little peekaboo window so she can see through and see them coming at her, which I thought was great too. It's like, oh yeah, look, she gets right there.
Yeah, that was an afterthought. Like we had to build the walls of his mansion and that gate. We actually built it on the grounds of the actual princess of Serbia, the royal family of Serbia. We were able to film on the grounds, and the house that you see on the exterior is part of the royal palace of Serbia, which
no way.
Very interesting that they let us film there. And yeah, and those little peak holes where they were introduced afterwards by David, because it just served the building of tension a little more, to be able to have visible access of that particular Cenobite coming for them.
Yeah.
And I think it worked in the end. It felt okay because they were small enough to make sense. Yeah.
I liked it. I thought it all worked really well. I liked that actress. I thought she did a really good job. I wanted her hair to move. That's the only thing. Her hair was.
I have to watch it again.
Her hair was somewhat distracting to me through the movie. Like it was like her bangs never moved, and they were constantly perfectly like in her face.
Interesting. See, I have to watch it again. And if I ever watch it again, then I'll probably see exactly that. Yeah. She has character, and what I've really enjoyed about David's choice with her character and also his costume design is we are accustomed to seeing very sexy, beautiful women in dread in horror movies.
Yeah.
it becomes so, the damsel in distress theme becomes so redundant.
No, she was strong.
And
She was a
and
strong
yeah,
person. Yeah. She was
and
good.
putting her in clothes that didn't speak necessarily to her physical features,
Yeah.
and turn, moving away from the sexualization of female roles in horror film, I think was a very bold and feminist move
Yeah.
from the director, and I applauded him for it.
I
I
thought
really
she was
enjoyed
good.
that.
The one other thing I wanted to know is with all of the elements, like the horror elements of like the chains and everything. I know that's all like CGI or like special effects or whatever. But were there elements you knew that you needed to design into the set to enhance the horror? Like oh, we need to see where those chains are coming from, which you probably don't. But I'm just wondering, was there anything that sticks out to you for like I had to design specifically for this because of this?
The chains were
The chains.
a lot. Some of the chains, not obviously the full extension, but we did design the chains,
Oh,
and
you
we did
did? Oh, wow.
fabricate them, and also the hooks.
Yeah.
We wanted them to be practical, and that's again, I think, really kudos to David, having grown up in the horror genre. He takes his audience very seriously, and as much as he insisted on having no CGI blood, but real blood, or as much real blood as possible. He also wanted to have most of the gags practical. So we did a lot of wire work,
Wow.
and we created the hooks, and we had prosthetics for some of the hooks penetrating the skin. And the chains were then also photographed by the VFX team and extended. So that was one thing. And then we also, the bathroom scene where her brother, when she first sees a Cenobite in the park, in the playground, her brother comes to her salvage and then walks into the bathroom to wash his hands, and then the bathroom starts shifting and a dimensional doorway opens up. We built that practically. That bathroom really shifted.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then we augmented it later with VFX. But those walls actually moved in stages and unfolded like a cube. I think there were 3 or 4 stages there for elements. And then it got enhanced. And we had the lighting gags, and a lot of that was practical. I'm trying to remember what else, but we had several elements of walls shifting and revealing the labyrinth of the Cenobites behind them, putting that all on tracks. I'm going through the movie right now, but there's a couple in the hospice where Maneker, the woman who worked for the antagonist for Void, dies. There was a couple of elements in there that we practically built as well and animated.
How was the crew there? I mean, I know you're saying like Knives Out was there and like other features, but how was the crew? Was it like, whoa, you guys are like, come over to LA, or was it like, this is pretty good for where we are?
I do think that Serbia has tremendous talent, and especially in the ages of 30 and 40, people, when the war happened in Serbia, and that's what a lot of my designers told me over there, kept going to school and kept getting their education while the war inebriated the country. And so you have a tremendous amount of education and talent there. I think culturally we're very different from Austria, first of all, because I'm from Austria, and then I became an adult in the United States, coming here in my early 20s. So there's definitely a cultural difference. And I do think that I would probably need to go back a second time when productions don't bottleneck, in order to fully understand and fully learn to appreciate the talent that is there. It was simply that so much of the talent was with the bigger movie that our movie, with a lot of very, very complex needs at times, was lacking experienced talent. And so that was at times hard to navigate, simply because of the concern of not hitting our own deadlines. Overall, though, I made some amazing contacts, and the feature film that I'm going on next, I am fighting to bring one of my set designers from there on board.
Oh,
He's
that's
from Hungary
fantastic.
originally. Yeah, he's from Hungary originally, and I have to say I've never seen such poetic and beautiful set design before.
Oh.
Like, he's brilliant. And we also, in terms of illustration and concept art, and the ability to integrate set design, a 2D drawing, and take it all the way to V-Ray, or set animation, that a lot of people have those talents in one person. And that's something that was very new to me, coming from the jobs that I've worked on here. And I love my crew in the United States. Every place I've gone, I've met wonderful crew. So I would say the art department talent was amazing. I think from the production side, it was difficult what we were presented with, and the choice that the production side made in Serbia. But in terms of talent, it was a great experience. Wonderful.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because I don't know. The show that I just ended. They went to Bulgaria to shoot for 3 weeks, and the designer was like, "I am just blown away. I've got this great art director, and I'm super excited." And I was like, "Are they better than us? Like, what do you mean?" Like. But he said it was just like a fantastic crew over there that he was jumping into this. So I was wondering if that was like the same thing. But it's like when you go to, a town in the U.S. and they're only like 1 or 2 deep in crew, and you're the third movie there or the third project, you kind of have to like take very green people, which we were all green at one time. But
exactly.
But the talent is there. It's scary, but the talent and the passion is there, which is even more important, I think, too.
I fully agree. And that's why, I can only second what he said. That often it comes down to management more than talent.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yes. So I knew about BMF. I didn't watch it till I knew I had to talk to you. I had to zip through a lot of it because of when we're talking right now, I couldn't get through the whole first and second season. So I chose.
That's all right.
I chose wisely, I think, of what I did. But I was trying to figure out, because it said it was shot in Detroit and Atlanta. But where did you just do some exteriors in Detroit, and then you were really shooting in Atlanta? Where were you shooting?
Our base is here in Atlanta, where I'm currently actually having this interview with you from. Our base is here in Atlanta. There was a big desire to film in Michigan and in Detroit, and I wish that had happened. But with the incentives gone since 10 years, it was just really hard to set up a full production. I think that was a choice in regards to budget, most than anything. But our showrunner, who's a dear, dear, dear friend of mine, Randy Huggins, is originally from Detroit, and the 2 brothers are from Detroit. And so the idea is, because it is based on a real life story, and there is definitely the loose attached to it, but I wanted to treat it like a biography.
Yeah.
I thought that would bring a lot of the realism to it. We decided early on to really bring as much as of Detroit as possible to Atlanta, and for the main world building parts, like the hero house and very specific staples that define so much of their identity as children and as teenagers, and as the adults that they broke away from Detroit of us. We needed to go back to Detroit and really find those staples that when people look back into the 80s and 90s could identify with. So in the first season, we went back for just a week, I think. I mean, obviously we prepped up there, but we didn't film more than a week. And then we had a second unit up there doing backdrop photography for our LED screens and all of that. And then in the second season, we went back for a longer amount of time. I think we were up there filming for almost 10 days. But I actually don't remember. It was 8 or 9 or 10 days.
Did you do season 1 and 2 after COVID?
I was booked. I got the phone call in our lockdown. I think I got the phone call in April, literally when the lockdown happened. And then we were supposed to go in June, which would have been the height of, the first 6 months of the pandemic. And we pushed until the fall. So I believe we started in November or December of that year and went into April or May. Then I went to do Hellraiser. And after Hellraiser, we came back and started season 2, which was last year.
Oh, nice. That's a nice...
Yeah.
That's a nice... Like I had a good thing going one time. I was doing like The Good Place and Veep, and like
there you go, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Like I got blood, I got horror, and then I got blood, and I got like good drama.
It mixes it up. I could not work in just one genre. I would get bored.
I know. I say that to people all the time. I'm like, how did we ever do 22, 24 episodes at a time? Like, my brain can't even do it anymore. I can't wait to get to 10 and be done.
Yeah, definitely. I know. And like episodic television really is that. Like, it becomes a marathon.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have so many sets and so many locations and so many on top of it problems that come up.
No, I don't think with the expectations in every department now of we're making movies every hour, they would kill us. Like, we'd be dead by 24 episodes if we had to do that. Like, so maybe somewhere along the line someone was like, let's just do 10. Like, that's called, I think it's The Sopranos that really started that 10 episode little seasons and everything, I think, kind of, or at least made it popular. But yeah, pulling all of this off for 24 would never work. I mean, so you had 8 the first season and then 10 the second, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I know this is a dumb question, but did you build the Dairy Queen? Did you build that? No,
we didn't. We actually, the Dairy Queen in the second season, so interesting because we found a location here in Atlanta that could have worked really well, and we did like the whole mock-up and everything and presented it. But there was just this sentimental attachment to really take that to Detroit. And so we flew up and scouted that location, and it made sense. It was in Southwest Detroit, and it was still a Dairy Queen.
Wow.
It didn't have any decoration. I mean, the guy sold the same product, let's say it that way.
Right.
But the environment seemed right for that shootout that's happening, and so we took measurements and everything, created the sign and the ads and turned it into that period place. So we brought in the umbrellas, and like it ended up being a full dress, but that actually was filmed in Detroit. And I have sentimental feelings about it because I remember the day exactly when we did it, and it's good that we did it there. But I wonder if it's noticeable that it's actually Detroit, or maybe we, world building in Atlanta to make it look like Detroit. That was definitely the biggest challenge.
Right.
I think that would be, if I had one request for the first and second season, I would say, I wish we had more resources and time to really do the exteriors, like to an extent that created larger worlds. Like
I see what you mean. The scope would be bigger for exterior shots.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I was completely fooled. I thought you were in Detroit the whole time or something. I think you did fantastic. All those like convenience stores and everything, and like I like the show, and then I was like, oh shit, I gotta go back and like watch a bunch of this because it reminded me a lot of The Wire first of all. So I which is one of my favorite shows. And I have this sense of like because it's two brothers, the first season is more about Mesh and the second is about Terry. Am I kidding? Did I make that up? Or it just feels like they're getting more screen time. I don't know. But from what I watched, I was like, oh,
and
now
you got it completely right. And I don't know how many people pick up on it, but the showrunner's intention was to tell the first season from the point of view and with the voice of Meech.
Yeah.
Big Meech, who is really the cultural icon that I think people talk about to this day in pop culture and hip hop culture. And Terry, his brother, is the more classy, conservative person, and the second season lended itself to his voiceover as they expand and also break away from one another. So you got that right.
I love the brother, because I have two boys, so I think about that all the time, the bond between brothers and like taking care of your brother but being pissed at your brother. I can't imagine trying to run a drug empire at the same time. I don't know, but I definitely think that their character development over the season, the seasons, is really good and shows such growth. And I like the kind of like jumping back and forth in time, like seeing the ending before they show it and everything. Those family dinner scenes I thought were great. Like all of that. I don't know. I love, this is one of the reasons too, I don't know if I would have picked up on this show, and now I'm watching a good show. So like I'm always happy, and good work too. That's what one of the things I love about doing this is like being introduced to people's work that I'm unaware of or something. So bravo. I thought you were in Detroit the whole time in 1989. So
that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that like it's really hard. For me it's hard, especially with a show like BMF where I spent 2 years on it, to detach myself from the subject matter and from the filmmaking process enough to see it with fresh eyes. And so it's really hard for me to watch it and really determine, are we effective? And I know that there's a lot of people who really appreciate and like the show. And I definitely think that in the art department, we were able to do some really beautiful sets, and that I'm walking away with now being very proud of.
Canines hang out. That's awesome. Canines, that guy, that's his name, right?
Wow.
The room with the chandelier, right? His chandelier, and then the TV wall, and then he's got the big mirror piece behind him, which was a built-in, right? And that's a set. I'm assuming that whole room is a set. Yeah.
We built that set, and that was really the first liberty in season 1 of making mentors that came to the brothers, giving them a bigger than life flair, and saying, okay, how can we branch away from the concept of generational poverty that we created with a sense of claustrophobia that the boys really need to break out of and grow out of? How do we create those characters while staying truthful to a realistic element, create them in a larger than life environment? And with K9 we took that liberty, and if you had seen that set without the actors in it, you could have possibly thrown it into a fantasy movie too. It had those very exaggerated textures and pillars and gold leaf and those very heavy ceiling beams. And I go back and I wonder, like, okay, like if we had had a little bit more time, that there could have been some refinement, but it was effective and people really liked it. And then a lot of the pieces that you just referred to really comes back to our set decorator, and that was Hernan Camacho.
Yeah, he's so nice.
Praise him. He was my partner in crime. And I often say, I just create shells for Hernan to play in. Our collaboration was so wonderful. And I remember when I called him and I said, Hernan, would you consider coming to Atlanta and doing this TV show with me? You don't even know me. And I thought I'll just offer it to him. And then he called me and he said, yes, I'm going to do it, Kathrin.
Yeah.
And that was just, I felt like I got really lucky
Yeah, he's
with a
great.
wonderful
He's got a
collaborator.
great eye. He's really great with color from what I've seen of his work. I've met him maybe a small handful of times, and I
Yeah.
just think he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's
Fun.
wonderful. And so that mirrored piece behind K9 was a piece that Hernan found.
Oh wow,
And
that's
he
a gem.
presented it to me. Yeah, it's a gem. And he presented it and said, Kat, that's our Scarface moment right there. And I said, let's go for it. It's
Yes.
wonderful. So that was a true collaboration. And I think I always aim for that with the set decorators. And because you guys, you are a set decorator yourself, you bring so much storytelling to the table. And I set a very high standard for
Yeah.
that position. Like I wouldn't want to. I couldn't settle with an interior decorator who doesn't understand the layers that storytelling and characters, the character define. The definition of character brings to your job and to the table with that.
And that's the fun part. That's what you hope you have time and money for. Is like the bedside pieces and the character pieces that you can throw in there. What books are they actually reading instead of just like, oh, I gotta buy a bunch of books for this wall. Like really sourcing out what would they be reading. But I also think in their house there's tons of layers of personality, and especially since it was designed that they're like always fixing it up and it's always a little bit under construction or unpainted walls or he punches a hole in the wall and it's there. Like, is that a progression that they wanted to show that they, or was that real? Did the brothers tell you that? Like, how did that come about?
Well, that's why I think this project is so entirely different than anything I've ever done before, and so dear to my heart and special is the amount of information that the family shared with me.
Oh,
and
that's great.
Randy invited me to come up to Detroit before we started pre-production on season 1, and I spent a weekend up there with him. And he introduced me to Mrs. Flannery, the mother of the
great.
brothers, and their sister and their best friend Roland, who also has a character portrayal in the TV series. And I was able to visit the original house that you also see in the TV series. And we broke bread together over dinner, and then they brought down a huge box of photos.
Oh.
And we spent an entire night with cognac looking through these photos, and they shared so much information with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was amazing. And I was really able to ask questions. And my partner, who is an art director, he had joined me on the trip, not as an art director, but as a partner and a documentary filmmaker. And he got involved in it all. And we were able, from that background of social and cultural anthropology and documentary, to really dive into not only what the architectural details were of that house as the core of our TV series, but also to find out what memories matter to the family.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and to Miss Flannery, it was the gold powder coated furniture frames and the velour sofa and her golden vertical blinds. And for Nicole, it was the way the stucco was done on the ceiling that she hand did in circles and put glitter on it. So there was so much pride in their memories that I felt like it was an obligation, but also a tremendous gift. Being able to take that information and design that set based on the information they shared. And so that everything that you addressed earlier in your question was part of the history of that house and the family dynamic and the poverty that they faced and the barter system that the father had of not necessarily bringing money home all the time, but bringing items home. Or, and so they partially were able to maintain the house and fix it up over the course of time, but it really tied into I think on a greater symbolic level, it's a representation of what generational poverty becomes and represents. It's kind of this home that's not complete and that's not always safe, but that has a lot of warmth and integrity at the same time.
Because it's not usually, it doesn't usually read well. I've done that set where like, oh, he's working on this room back here and it looks like they didn't finish the set and I gotta put ladders and tools around and it's like some visqueen up there and it just like it doesn't read unless it's like conveyed in this, in like verbally in the dialogue. But with this and you're watching this family and you're growing with this family over the seasons, it did feel like this is another character that they're working on. It's a part of this, you know, it's their home, that they're still, their sons are still there with them, and they're bringing up the younger daughter, and they're trying to keep their house and make the mortgage and like all of that. But I really enjoyed that it was portrayed like that, because that's realistic. You don't, a lot of people start renovations or they got the money at one time and now it's gone. And now we got to wait. And then we got to, you know, focus on getting bread here today or something. It's horrible, but it really showed, I think, such great character in the design of their house, instead of like, oh, we fixed up this one piece. It really was like throughout, which I really liked. And I love the tile in the kitchen. I would say that too.
Oh, we did so many samples to figure out the right tile that was all custom printed. But I think what you're addressing here is kind of that overall conundrum of our profession, right? If you describe production design and set decoration, everything in between, and that entails the art department, and then even go beyond that into filmmaking. But I think for production design and set decoration especially, our job is really, we put ourselves into the shoes of other people, and that's it. That's what we do, and that's what we need to constantly curate and shape and educate and question. Are we doing it right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I'd rather let other people judge that work if we succeeded or not, because I think there's always, it's that fine balance of figuring out the tonality of a project that we're working on, and then understanding how do we manifest that in a complete natural sense. Like, how do you dress an object so it looks like it's been there? It just belongs.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of broken away from the concept of trying to dress anything for camera. I just dress for the people that live in that space. And you just ignore the camera, and you ignore the thought that a camera is ever going to be in that space.
No. And you ignore when they tell you we're not going to see over there. Because they are.
Yeah, well, yes.
Because they are, and then you're going to be screwed. So you got to dress the whole thing. Yes.
And we did on BMF. I don't think there was one location where we actually decided to do just a 2-wall set, or where we have a 4th wall. I think in every season we had over 200 sets.
Yeah, you've got
not set builds, but locations.
Tons.
And everything was a 360 dress. Yeah. Everything.
Did you, so your builds were their house, the police station, was that a build?
Yes.
And then you said K9s was a build.
Oh, in the first season we built the Flannery home, the lower floor and the upper floor. Then Lawanda's home, the yellow place, that's the Terry's girlfriend at the time. Then we built the house for Monique, Meech's lover, who was played by Cash Doll, and I just completely adore her. Then we built the police station, we built the barbershop, we built the record store.
The record store. Yeah, I was going to say the record store.
The barbershop turned into the record store.
Oh, wow.
Then the back room for that barbershop, and then that back room turned into 2 more gambling spots. Then we built so many things. We had 16 set builds, like stage for the entire season on season 1 plus swing sets, and then on season 2, the AAA set, that FBI set. Then we built K9s, which was 2 rooms. We built B. Mickey's basement. Then several bathrooms, several bedrooms. Yeah, it was a lot. It was, our stages ran out of space at some point. We only have 2 spaces, 2 stages. And now in season 3, I was only there for prep, but we Frankensteined a lot of these old sets and yet again turning them into new ones. So there was a lot of set construction, which obviously we always love.
Yes, we love to build because we have control.
Yes.
No, I love the build. I thought, I was wondering too at some point if the church was a build. But then, like, with the doors and everything, I was like, I don't know. But that's...
We found a church.
We found a church, yeah.
That.
It's so great. That just one kind of odd place to picture in the back is so perfect.
Yeah, we wanted to leave it intentionally sparse and awkward. Like, I love going, and you know that from Location Scouts, like you really dive into these random places of people that never expected a film crew to show up and consider their home as a film set. And then you just watch and you're like, how? Like, what's the motivation that picture frame ended up an inch away from the door trim, although there's an entire wall next to it that has nothing on it? Like, how do people think? And I find that so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it's hard to replicate. It's hard to replicate because it feels so wrong. And when you do it, you do it and you're like, it just looks like I did, like, that looks ridiculous. And then you're like, it's supposed to look ridiculous. And that's when it works. When you let go. But no, I love it.
And you're absolutely right. It's hard to recreate nature. And it's hard to recreate natural instincts of human beings. And I think that's a constant study that, that keeps us busy and curious.
Yeah. So are you going to do season 3 or just prepped it?
I'm not going to. I jumped on to assist in the birth of a couple of sets. But that is the goodbye then. Yes. Yeah. I think being on a show for two full seasons is a beautiful experience. And unfortunately, in our industry, sometimes we are attached to projects that overlap or that push and then start overlapping, and then we have to make that hard choice of what where to pour our passion into.
Well, that really is the hard thing, and timing in this industry of like, and I always have like fear that I didn't pick the right thing, or like fear that like I should have just waited and this would have came, or like, of course they called me a week after. Like, I constantly have that. But you have to just feel it out and know what's right and what's going to work for you. And I think everybody's grabbing on anything right now because we could potentially have a strike, which would suck.
Yeah. And I think like with this whole like feeling of being afraid of missing an opportunity, I'm trying, and it's not easy and it doesn't always work. But I think as much as we pick projects, they also pick us, and stories pick us. Yeah. And when I look back, maybe not so much in my TV projects, but a lot of the feature films, they came at a time where a theme in that feature film was prominent in my personal life. And it allowed me a playground to deal with certain questions in my own life. And so I'm of the firm belief of saying that projects find us. And that allows me sometimes to not weep over opportunities that I missed. And it also helps us to not compare ourselves too much with others. And I think that's a very difficult thing in our industry. And we come up with peers, and then, in their eyes, we excel. And in our eyes, our peers are always more successful than we are, or have these great connections, or land this project, or get that award. Yeah. And dealing with that and finding peace with it, of, not comparing ourselves, I think is very, very important, because we have to find our path. Yeah.
It is, and it's really hard to do. It's really hard. You're so very right. Hard. You're so on it.
Yeah, or even like what you said in the beginning.
I really appreciate her talking about the strengths and the struggles of working out of the country, because it's got to be hard. it's got to be hard as a designer to just go blindly, like feeling alone in this project that you want to do so well in, and maybe feeling like your art department is weak or you're not getting good people. And I'm not saying she didn't say that. I'm talking about a fear that I would have. I would be very anxious about that. But there is so much that goes into the horror genre, and the pressure, I would think, of taking over a cult classic. So I'm glad that I got to talk to her. I think she did a tremendous job updating the design of the story, and again, that those Art Deco elements I really think lended to the overall design being successful. And I'm not gonna lie, I really thought that BMF was filmed in Detroit. So bravo to that crew. You fooled me. I was like, oh, look at her. She's all over the world. She's in Atlanta. But thank you, Kathrin, for that interview, and hope I get to meet her. She sounds cool. I love that accent. I like it. Let's see, what do we got? Coming up next week, we have production designer James Bartle. After that, production designer Clarence Major, set decorator Regina Graves to kick off our little Emmy season here. I might have some Emmy contenders. In fact, I got a couple coming in for you. 1, 2, maybe 3, and then I have a really big interview that I have been prepping for like 2 years, and I finally got the balls to reach out to someone, and they said yes, and I'm so happy. So that is coming up soon too. I know, settle down. I'm not going to tell you because I haven't recorded it yet. I don't really like to tell who I'm going to talk to before I record it because schedules change, and then I don't get to talk to people, and then, it doesn't happen, and I feel like an ass. All right, but please review and rate on any platform. Follow Decorating Pages on Instagram, TikTok, which I'm lacking, but the ones that I have up there are good. Take a look. I will get to do some more. And then check out the Decorating Pages podcast.com, and that's it. That's all I got. So I hope you got an earful. I'm Kim One Up with Decorating Pages.